Hey there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back. It's another Red Pill Religion podcast. Red Pill Religion, where amongst the things we say is that it is okay to criticize any religious or non-religious group, ethnicity, or culture, especially its leadership and its most prominent members. If you like the kind of work you see us doing here, please support us on redpillreligion.com. Remember, we have had bogus strikes, bogus false flaggings. We've been chased off of about 3 total channels now. And so if we disappear from here on YouTube, please find us here on redpillreligion.com, where we could also use your financial support. By the way, we're doing a fundraiser. We are up to $120. We are trying to raise $1,000 for the Freedom from Atheism Foundation and to upgrade our microphones and upgrade us to a professional podcasting network. So if you could, and you like this, what you're seeing here, please click the link there and give us a donation through PayPal. We also appreciate everybody who buys our merchandise, which you'll find on the redpillreligion.com site. And we also enjoy, PayPal donations and Subscribestar, and we're working on We Gather app. So with all that said, today we are joined by our friend Mischa Popoff, who a writer for Culture Wars magazine and former talk show host and columnist. How you doing these days, Mischa?
Doing good.
All right, now, so we're going to talk about the issue of ethnic nationalism, and we're going to be talking about a specific type of ethnic nationalism. But first, I want to talk about the subject. I want people to know where I come down on and how I think about these things. One of the most important things to realize is that ethnic nationalism, there's more than one kind of nationalist, okay? But an ethnic nationalist, the most dangerous kind is usually secular, i.e. godless, or they consider religion irrelevant or a nuisance or just something you give lip service to. This is also true of globalist Marxists, one-worlders and that sort of thing. And if you look at, in a political discussion like this, you could easily use this chart here to describe Hungarians, Poles, Americans, Jews, Druze, quite a few other groups actually, because you look at the average person, you will usually have your globalist Marxists and your secular ethnic nationalists, which are both getting very popular in the United States, by the way, and all over Europe. And it's a concern for a lot of us because there's nationalism that's like more of a civic, religious, cultural nationalism, and that tends to be okay. But ethnic nationalism wrote it on race lines. Like white nationalism is very toxic. Actually, black nationalism is too. And while black nationalism is not that dangerous in the United States, it's been known to be murderous elsewhere, just like white nationalism is known to be murderous. Other forms of nationalism, like extreme, Indian nationalism and nationalism can be bad because basically what happens is people put their race, basically what we would say is where I think Mischa and I would both agree, they're putting their race where God's supposed to go, or they're putting the state where God's supposed to go. The globalist Marxist is putting their idea of a one world utopia where God's supposed to go. Then you have people who are mobsters or gangsters, opportunists. They don't even really care that much about where their politics lie, but they'll get involved in any criminal activity. Globalists or Marxists or ethnic nationalists will hire them. And they'll happily work for anybody, whoever's paying, right? Then you have religious people. Now, religious people can bleed over into any of these other ideologies, but the really devout ones almost never do, because they have an uncomfortable relationship with secular ideologies. And then you might say you have your harmless average citizen. Within world politics right now, I think this is a pretty good taxonomy of most people. Hungarians, Americans, Brits, whatever. Now, we have some groups, however, who are a little more influenced in their identity by their religion. This includes, but is not limited to, Jewish people. There are some other groups too, like specifically the Druze, and there are a few others I'm not thinking of where their religion and their tribal identity are together. But this is more or less true for Jews. And so what's interesting is the taxonomy looks the same. You have a lot of Jews who are globalist Marxists. You have a lot of Jews who are Zionists. And I'm afraid this is what really upsets people, because when I finally clicked on this and when I finally saw it, it forever changed my view of Zionism. I totally think the Jewish people are it's okay for them to have a homeland, and I don't think Israel should be wiped off the map. And I have lots of friends, especially in the religious Jewish community, but also secular Jews. But Zionism is an ethnic nationalism. It's an ethnic nationalist as ideology, and it's secular in nature too. It's got an uncomfortable relationship. So you have globalist Marxists, Zionist ethnic nationalists, mobsters. By the way, there is such a thing as a Jewish mafia, and it can be very powerful. Then there's the observant Orthodox, who usually have an uneasy or non-existent relationship with all the above. And then in the state of Israel, you have your standard average citizen who's caught between any of all these forces and may have some leanings in any given direction. The one thing that's a little odd about the Jews, and this is true of a few other groups, if you leave, like, you can become an atheist or some kind of weird occultist, but if you jump off the reservation among the Jews and become a Christian, you're usually in trouble with most of the other groups. Jews aren't the only groups like that, but they're one of them. So tonight, though, we're going to be talking about Zionism, and in the terms that, as I used to even call myself a Zionist, Mischa, although I meant that in a very loose American sort of, yeah, I like Israel, and Israel, I like my Jewish friends, so I'm a Zionist. But the more I look at Zionism, and feel free to start with your own thoughts here, the more I look at the Zionism, the more I see it as a rather malevolent, secular, nationalist, ethnic supremacist ideology. And you get called an anti-Semite for saying that, but that's what I increasingly see a lot of in Zionism. What do you think?
Yeah, you're right. I too fell into that trap, especially after 9/11. I really vilified Muslims. I mean, the news report immediately after 9/11 is that there were dancing Middle Easterners who had witnessed the second plane hit. Well, it turns out these Middle Easterners were Jewish, and they were probably Mossad agents, and they were arrested and interrogated and returned to Israel after 70 days. And but yeah, that was all covered up. I mean, all the networks just reported on dancing Middle Easterners, which quickly became dancing Muslims, and even Trump, who I went to see him here in Dallas with some friends. It was like going to a rock concert. I mean, he referred to dancing Muslims, and we all cheered. We all fell for it. So don't feel bad about that. I mean, it was a really good sustained propaganda campaign.
And so you feel that it's been well enough proven these were Mossad agents, not Muslims, who were doing that dancing?
Yeah. There's no doubt. The redacted photos have been released through Freedom of Information, and it's pretty easy to piece together. A few people, I don't know if I should mention the other channels on your channel, but there's been some really good sleuth work done just in a matter of like the last couple of weeks. And yeah, they were Israeli Mossad agents working for a moving company called Urban Concepts or Urban Storage or something. And it was a front. It is known that company itself was a front for Israeli Mossad here in America.
Okay, and now here's where I'm going to come across as the pedantic, PC, liberal type, and I'm going to say what I don't like in a lot of those discussions, because I've seen them and I've seen the photos, and what I don't like is they'll say these are the dancing Jews. That to me is too much. It's not inaccurate, and it's not even necessarily racist, but it totally lacks any precision, including my Jewish friends who were weeping, and I knew quite a few on the same day with me. But we say dancing Mossad agents, we say dancing Zionists. All of a sudden, dancing agents of the Israeli government. Zoom, we have some real issues there, and why on earth? Well. Okay, so we have reason to think people people within Mossad were involved in 9/11, and that is such a scary thought. I don't even want to turn this into a 9/11 stream, but let's just say that there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people, including me, who think the official story is wrong, and that does not mean I have to endorse any particular other theory to say I really do think there were people who knew it was coming. And I don't think I have to say more than that. And I think there were people in the U.S. government and maybe the Israeli government who knew. Heck, I've got my a friend, a rabbi, who says he thinks the same thing. He thinks the Mossad was involved. So even still, any of those people from those channels, just remember, I really do have Jewish friends, and you need to be able to at least taxonomize your who you're criticizing.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
And
Go from one extreme and swing all the way to the other. I mean, vilifying all Muslims for the last 20 years, Max. That doesn't justify now vilifying Jews. You're absolutely right. These were agents of evil, definitely.
It is, yeah. And you know, they could have been Jewish mobsters too, who just got hired to do things. Who'll do any. I mean, we have reason to think the government hasn't told us the whole truth, and that other players were involved in 9/11. And I'm not going to be called a kook for saying that.
No.
The question is then, if the Israeli government, the Zionist government there, I mean, they go through different governments. I happen to think the one for Netanyahu is run by Netanyahu right now is particularly foul, and he's not that well liked by the Israelis. By the way, do people know, they'll talk about Israel as a democracy, but do most people realize that they have, I don't know how many Jews abroad they have come to vote in their elections, but like, if you're Jewish, you can go vote in the Israeli elections even if you never lived there.
Wow, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No, it makes sense. Absentee voting. I mean,
I happen to know this because I had a good buddy, Mo. I worked on some political campaigns with him, and I've heard about this from several sources. I'll run it down in case I'm nuts, but no, any Jew in the world is entitled to Israeli citizenship if they sign up for it, if they want it. And every year around election time, certain political parties will literally go round up people, Jews from like Florida or whatever, and help them get their Israeli citizenship and help them to vote.
Yeah. Wow.
Which of course corrupts the Israeli elections for the Israelis who live there. And by the way, I've had friends who are Israelis, Jewish Israelis, by the way, who complained like American Jews are way more Zionist than we are.
Yeah. Well, and Max, those people going around gathering up these Jewish votes of the diaspora, the Jews living, say, here in America, they're not going to go to the neighborhood of Rabbi David Weiss, who we discussed in our last interview. I mean, he's totally anti-Israel. He points out that in the Torah, no Jews are supposed to return to the Holy Land until after the Messiah returns. He's the one who points out that the Star of David is actually the Star of Remphan that Jesus refers to as an evil sign. In any case, yeah, I mean, no one's looking.
I reached out to him to try and interview him. I might try and contact him again. Yeah, people should hear that too. They really can. I think when people are talking about this, and I am not chiding anybody as an anti-Semite or as a hater. I am saying it's good even for your own rational faculties not to just slip into saying the Jews did this, the Jews did that, well, no. It is easy to spot a mobster. It is easy to spot a Zionist. It is easy to spot a Jewish communist. You can tell the difference. And I think the Zionist government in Israel has some real human rights issues. And the Zionist movement has some real troubled history, including Zionists mistreating the Jewish people. Yeah, and I know we talked about some of that in the last one in the abstract, but you give me a couple of links here. And why don't we just go ahead and talk about them? I've put them on the article on redpillreligion.com. We have a few things there. We have a couple of quotes from a book by Mischa, which we'll talk about in a minute. But like, for example, you gave a few photos. Why don't you talk to me about what these photos are that we pulled out of Wikimedia and the Royal London Hospital Archives?
Sure. Let's go chronologically. So we'll skip that first one. We'll come back to it. The first one that looks like barber chairs. But yeah, what you see in the middle one is a ship sinking. I think that's sinking in Haifa Harbor. I mean, it was a ship carrying Jewish refugees. This really proves, that the Zionists wanted to create trouble for Jews in Europe. I mean, they were as much behind it as the Nazis. And as we discussed, of course, they signed an agreement that lasted for 6 years and probably even longer, called the Havara Agreement, also known as the Transfer Agreement, whereby peace-loving German citizens who happen to be Jewish would be sort of encouraged or maybe forced into moving down to Palestine, abandoning their good lives in prosperous Germany to go live in the desert and fight Arabs, as the expression went. But yeah, one of these ships was carrying Jewish refugees. And what do we have the year here of this, just to make sure. But the ship was sunk. It was sabotaged, and it was sabotaged by the very people who would form the Likud party. These were at the time they were referred to as the Irgun group.
Wait a minute, Likud, that is Bibi Netanyahu's party, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was where Ariel Sharon and Menachem Begin all cut their teeth. Those guys all had their turn at being prime minister before they died. I think one of them was assassinated by Jews, no less. He was assassinated because he was trying to make peace with the Arabs, so they had to get rid of him. That was back in the late 80s, if I recall. But yeah, anyway, there's this ship carrying 1,800 Jewish refugees. I mean, it wasn't like, see on 9/11, Max, I know you don't want to make this a 9/11 show, but a lot of people claim, it's a conspiracy theory, that a message went out to Jews, only to Jews, on the morning of the attack, and it warned them, don't come into work today. Now, as I say, I think that's just a conspiracy. But as soon as anyone mentions that, the Zionists, they always say, oh, don't kid yourself. A lot of Jews died in the towers. Out of the 3,000 people, maybe there was a couple hundred Jews. But that really brings us to tonight's discussion. The Zionists don't care. The tower could have been full of Jews. There could have been 3,000 Jews in that tower that morning, and they still would have brought it down if indeed they did, as we were discussing. But back to this is the SS Patria. It was a French ship. And there it was, carrying Jewish refugees to supposedly to freedom and in the promised land. And the Irgun terrorists blew it up. And so of the 1,800 Jewish refugees on it, here's your statistics. It killed 267 people, injuring 172, including 50 British crew members. I believe it was a French ship, but it was being, this was in wartime, so there was a lot of sharing of resources. And one way or another, it had 50 British crew members on it. And yeah, they sank it. It's kind of a hard picture to see, but the ship is listed to at least 45 degrees. This is just before it went right down. So this is right up there with the bombing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. As you might know, the British were they had done a lot of investigating, and they figured out that the attacks being carried out on them, and this was back in the 20s and 30s, that the attacks weren't being carried out on them by Arabs, but were in fact being carried out. They were false flag operations being carried out by what is now the Likud party. Back then, what was the Irgun party? What is
Mischa, what is the reason for the sinking of this ship?
Yeah, because they wanted to create victims. I mean, that's their MO. See,
the false flag attack that they were determined to have inflicted on their own people to make it look like an Arab attack or Muslim attack or whatever.
Exactly. So these people, this was, by the way, this was after the war. They had survived the Holocaust, which is a whole story in itself. And by the way, there's no doubt that a few million Jews were indeed murdered by the Nazis. The 6 million figure is probably not accurate, but it doesn't matter. I mean, 1 million is too much. But the point here of this discussion is those Jews were as much victims of the Zionists who were in cahoots with Hitler as these refugees on this ship after the war. This is after the war, and yeah, the terrorists. Who knows the mind of a terrorist? What were they really thinking? Well, it's just to create chaos and create victims under a false flag is the bottom line.
It is documented history that Zionist interests before World War II were in fact working with the Nazi government. some of that, without getting into it, it is actually true. And even when Hitler turned against the Jews, the Zionists were really busy all over Europe trying to use this as still further excuse to push Jews to move to Israel. I mean, so a lot of the Jews who moved to Israel didn't really want to go that much, and were, well, in any case, there's dark sides to this history too. Let's look at another one of these images, just because I'm curious. What's the next one?
Yeah. Now that's our little barber chairs, and that brings us up to the 1950s. So there, Israel is now formed. And by the way, I agree with you. Israel should exist as surely as Canada and America should exist. There were indigenous populations here that weren't treated so well, and so who are we to say to Israel, you got to give the land back to the Palestinians? But what has to happen in Israel is the Palestinians, now that the bloodshed is all in the past, and now they should treat the Palestinians the way America and Canada treats their Indians. That what's the past is the past, but let them be equal citizens. In any case, there they were. So after the war, Israel is formed for better or for worse, and the ruling Jews, like guys like Ariel Sharon and Menachem Begin, and Netanyahu too. I mean, he's alive by this point. He's just a young guy. Him and his brother, who ends up getting killed in a military operation. They're definitely Zionists, and so they see what's going on. And what's happening is a lot of undesirable Jews are using the right of return to move to Israel. And we see this to this day, Max. African Jews, Ethiopian Jews move to Israel. It's their right. You and I can visit. Actually, you could probably still live there. You have Jewish. I have some Jewish ancestry, but you're actually a former Jew, as I understand. So you could.
No, I'm not. I'm a former atheist, but I'm not a former Jew. No, I've just had a lot of. It's a long story, and this is why this twists people up. But I swear to you, when I was an atheist, it was smart Orthodox Jews who made me think it was intelligent to believe there was a God. So I really do have a fondness for them. Of course, I want them all to come to Jesus, but at the same time, I'm not here to, harangue them, harass them, denigrate them, blah blah blah. So anyway, so we have the Likud party, and let me guess, there were some experiments.
No, well, what was going on is they didn't like what they referred to as undesirable Jews, basically non-white Jews. Now, as you know, if you're Semitic, that's actually a language group, but the true Semites includes Arabs as well as Jews, and they're sort of olive-skinned. And then
most Arabs are Semites. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then you have the Ashkenazi, which DNA analysis has now proven they're basically European. They're Turkic. They're not descendants of Abraham from the Holy Land. But anyway, these Sephardic Jews, these Ashkenazi Jews, people like like Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's just use him, or Ben Shapiro, the so-called conservative talk show host here in America. These are Ashkenazi Jews. They didn't like. First of all, they didn't like a lot of the real Jews, the real Semites.
I've literally had Jews I know say the Sephardim are kind of retarded. They don't.
Yeah, but then worse than the real. Worse than the real.
Didn't say that, by the way. I'm repeating something somebody said. Don't accuse me of saying Sephardim are retarded. I've just literally heard that kind of talk. Everybody, go ahead. Sorry.
Here's the point. What the Jews they didn't like, they thought they were even worse than the authentic Holy Land Semitic Jews, and these were, of course, the Sephardic Jews, as you've said. Yeah, the Sephardic Jews, and they were definitely much darker because they're from North Africa, and so they cooked up this plan. Pretending to treat them for ringworm. And what those chairs are radiation chairs. And radiation was used, it's true, in the 1950s, but only very limited use of it to treat ringworm. Ringworm basically goes away on its own. And they knew that before, but when X-rays were discovered, X-rays were overused quite a bit.
X-rays did used to be able to use the crazy overmount, yes.
Yeah, even to see the size of your foot before you bought a pair of shoes, you know, as crazy as that is. But this was no accident. The Ashkenazi Jews who are running the new state of Israel, they literally cooked up a scheme to trick Sephardic children to come in and get overdoses of radiation, ostensibly to treat ringworm. And that was whether they had it or not. There were some cases of ringworm, definitely, but they would just run all these kids through.
Good God.
And
thousands blasting their faces with x-rays.
Yes, and their scalp, mostly their scalp. And so now we have to say this. I'm not going to say the word, but the Ashkenazi referred to these Sephardic children as Niggers.
Of course, they're darkies and they're inferior. That would be the thinking, right? This is just in case anybody doesn't know, I know enough about this to just look at this. If you've ever gone and gotten a dental X-ray, a simple dental X-ray, or like, you know, even to get a chest X-ray, but let's just say a dental X-ray because everybody's probably done that at least once. You'll notice they get behind a lead apron, and you know they put a lead apron on you to protect you, and you know the radiologist goes behind a shield, and they click, and it's like less than a second. I know that in the 1950s, it wasn't anything like that. Even in America, they would just kind of hit you with the X-rays. There wasn't even like a cutoff switch. They just turn it on like turning a camera on and bake you until they were done looking at you and let go. They eventually figured out that caused problems. Yeah. But so by the 50s, in fact, they had figured that out, that was a problem. And to just deliberately bathe somebody, even by 1950s medical knowledge, just to deliberately bathe somebody's head and scalp in X-rays to kill ringworms, you're trying to harm those people.
Yeah, Max, that's the point here. By this time, this is 1952. Right. The halcyon days of overuse of X-rays were over. People had
30s and 40s. They figured it out. Yeah,
exactly. So this is there's no way to pretend that this was an accident. And as I mentioned, it's going on to this day. Ethiopian Jews are being offered, you know, they're being offered cash to leave Israel, and there's even a deal being made. Israel's making a deal with the United Nations. That basically they'll accept, I think the number is 60,000 North African Jews. They'll accept 60,000 of them on temporary citizenship in exchange for an equal amount, another 60,000 being sent to Germany and Canada. And the irony, no one told Canada and Germany about this, but it's a deal Israel worked out with the UN. But the point is,
what are these black Ethiopian Jews going to do in frickin' Germany or Canada? Well, I mean, it's going to be just like the Muslims, right? Well, I don't want to go there, but you know what I mean. They'll have no way of fitting in. Everybody will hate them. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just. I mean, if those people are a problem, surely Israel should take care of them. But
if the one thing Israel is the homeland where all Jews may go, what is Israel doing trying to get rid of some Jews? Except that they're Jews that they don't happen to like. They're not Zionism. I'm telling people don't want to hear me, and I don't know. I keep getting scared. I'm going to lose the whole channel for it. On Facebook, I've been banned for simply saying things like this. It's very disturbing. The more I look at it, Zionism is an ethnic nationalist, secular ideology, a godless ideology, a secular ideology, an ethnic nationalist ideology, and they don't even care about all Jews. They only want Jews of certain specific bloodlines. It appears.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that within Israel, because I've known people from Israel, they're not all Zionists.
No, Max, the estimate is 80% of Jews worldwide, probably the percentage is lower in Israel, but worldwide, 80% of Jews do not support what the Zionists are doing.
Where do you get that figure?
I wish I had it at my fingertips. I think it's Rick Wiles from True News. He's in Florida.
Okay. And even then, 80% do not support. Well, I mean, really, I'm not kidding. I've watched politics for decades, including Israel. I don't know it as well as some people do, but I know enough. And Yeah, Zionist parties, they manage to find rule all the time, but Zionism itself is not that wildly popular among the people living in Israel. And I really have had people who live in Israel say, we wish the American Jews would be a little less Zionist.
Yeah.
And because remember, American Jews often get to vote in Israeli elections, even though they don't live there. And not just American, Canadian, other countries too, but a whole lot of them in the U.S. And so the very pro-Israel stance that the U.S. government and media take at this moment, I can tell you for a fact, is not always taken by the average Israeli citizen at all.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And I could be wrong to say the percentage is lower in Israel, and yet Netanyahu.
I would actually bet that Zionism is more popular outside Israel than inside it. In fact, I would be shocked if that is not true, because it's easy for me to run off and find a pack of Jews still living in Russia, or a pack of Jews living in Montreal, or New York, and say, yay, Zionism, come to feed Israel. Here, come give us money, give us cash. Here's some photos that get you upset. Here's some materials that get you upset. Give us some money. Come vote for us. Stay here, so you're not in our way anymore. Stay here in New York or wherever it is that you're at. It's not a great scheme.
But two things. Remember our friend Rabbi Dovid Weiss. He lives in New York, so he is outside. And he's not just an exception. I mean, he's part of a group of thousands of New York Jews who totally reject Zionism. So I just want to throw that out. But also the second point, Max, is don't forget Netanyahu just won another election. I mean, so someone's voting for him in Israel. But you're right. A lot of Israeli citizens, they don't want to harm Palestinians. They serve as a matter of officialdom in the IDF. They don't serve with gusto. They have no interest. Well, I think our last discussion, we discussed how some Orthodox Jews living in Israel, they are now forced to serve in the Israeli Defense Force. They used to have an exemption. They're forced to serve, but they will not carry a gun and walk into a Palestinian neighborhood. They just say, forget you Ashkenazis. Go in there and beat them up if you want. We're not doing it, and they hang back, and good for them.
I really think that it really is important for people to realize it's blind adherence to any nationalism. Any nationalism is crazy. And I'm telling you straight, I've had people I thought were friends just go completely bonkers on me, attacking me as an anti-Semite. When I said, I've got all I actually even said was, I've become to rethink my position on Zionism. That's all it took. People lost their minds. And I started hearing, about the Muslims, and the Muslims are trying to kill us all. I haven't even gotten into that, because as a Christian, I'm not pro-Islam at all, but I often get accused of it because I've done my due diligence. Not everything the Muslims are accused of is true at all. And it appears to me that Zionist interests want to portray what's going on as the Muslims trying to kill the Jews in Israel, and that's what the Zionists seem to want us to believe that story. That is not what is happening. Mind you, there are plenty of Muslims who want to kill Jews. Don't get me wrong, but that is not the main driving force here. But by the way, everybody, I should go ahead and just say this because it is worth pointing out. Because I think this is really important to understanding the region. When you talk about Arabs, guess how they pan out? There are globalist Marxist Arabs. There are not Zionist Arabs, but there are ethnic nationalist Arabs. And by the way, that included people like Saddam Hussein. It includes the Ba'athist Party. So, I mean, Arab nationalism is not Islamic. They'll sometimes take some Islamic trappings, but no, they're fascists in the literal sense. So you got your globalist Arabs, you got your ethnic nationalist Arabs, you do have your just plain criminal Arabs, you do have your observant Muslims. And believe me, I can't get anybody in the United States to believe me on this anymore. The most observant, pious Muslims are the least likely to go off on terrorist assaults. They just are. I mean, mind you, they might support other things we consider extreme, but it's usually somebody who got manipulated who gets off on the terrorist activity.
Yeah.
It's worth noting, Zionism is an ethnic nationalist identity for Jews, and Arab nationalism is a very similar race nationalist policy and ideology. I would say they're almost the same. And so it's useful to see this because in that area, the people fighting Israel, sure, some of them are Muslims and some of them are unhinged Muslims. Ton of the people who hate Israel, of the Arabs, there's a lot of Arab commies and they don't like Israel. There are Arab nationalists, and believe it or not, the Arab nationalists can be weird because some of them really hate Israel, but some of them are like, oh, we don't see why we couldn't be friends. Because they're nationalists. But Israel does things that annoy the Arab powers. My point is, I know that I just rambled a little bit, but back me up here, Mischa. Anybody who thinks the conflict going on with Israel right now is a Muslim versus pious Jew fight, that is not what is happening in the Middle East right now. It simply is not what's happening. Do you know what I mean, Mischa?
Yeah, I totally agree. What you have is greedy, non-observant Jews like the Zionists, mostly Ashkenazi, and they're really in cahoots with greedy, non-observant Arabs who enjoy wine, women, and song, just like any debauched Christian does.
Yes,
I mean, there's a real brotherhood there.
You think, you think there's not Arabs who love going to Israel and getting drunk and doing jobs for various Israelis? Of course there are. It's the whole situation there is complex, and anybody who thinks it's Muslims versus, the rabbis and their flock, that's not even close to reality. Tell you what, we've been going a little while here. I'd like to wrap it up in the next 15 minutes or so. Sure. 10-15 minutes. Tell us about these two books. This is all on the redpillreligion.com site. We've got it linked in the low bar. And we have a couple of quotes from a book here, and apparently it's your book. So I'm just going to read from this book. Why don't I?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, actual evidence of an attempted genocide comes from within the hollowed borders of Israel itself. No, I'm not referring here to the ongoing genocide of Christian and Muslim Palestinians. Rather, the genocide of Sephardic Jews deemed defective by the ruling class of Ashkenazi Jews. In 1952, former terrorist and then Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, approved the program to fool Sephardic children into receiving lethal doses of radiation under the ruse that they were fighting ringworm. I should actually display this on the screen while we're doing it. Ringworm. These Sephardics were referred to by some Ashkenazim Jews, I would have just said some Zionists, who would have, editorial suggestion there, who would have you believe to this day that Ashkenazis are all geniuses, as Ers. That's right, they referred to their Sephardic Jewish brothers and sisters as Ers. They actually use that word. Thousands of Sephardic children died in the name of eugenics. As Dr. Chaim Sheba led a program to supposedly eradicate ringworm in children of newly arrived Jewish immigrants from the African continent, not European, African, even though ringworm eventually disappears all on its own. The program was carried out under the Division of Social Medicine, i.e. eugenics, of the Israeli Ministry of Health, and involved repeated irradiation of children's scalps, resulting in tens of thousands of deaths, with survivors often contracting cancer later in life. Of course, there are also those who claim that radiation was a standard treatment for ringworm inside and outside Israel in the 1950s. No, that's just nonsense. Let's keep reading. While radiation may have been considered suitable for ringworm in that era, no one killed children with radiation outside of Israel. And lest anyone believe this was a tragic one-off, an aberration by an otherwise caring ruling Jewish class, for anybody who's screaming racism, you could say ruling Arab class, ruling whatever class here. We turn to the story of the Jewish refugee ship that was sunk in the second year of World War II. This is the one you were talking about. No, not by the Germans. Jewish terrorists organized by the Jewish Agency, that's what it was called, the Jewish Agency, which would later become the Israeli government, sank the SS Patria. The ship had over 1,800 Jewish refugees. The bombing killed 267 and injured 172. Yeah, we mentioned all this earlier. These were the same Zionists in evil spirit and deed who quashed the rescue settlement of Jews from Germany Rabbi Weissmandl had so painstakingly negotiated. Who was Rabbi? Anyway, everybody should read this. And before I actually ask that question, where are we going to be able to get this book, Mischa?
Probably not for quite a few months. Like I'm thinking 6 months. I'm still working, and it goes right back to actually goes back to bringing down the walls of Jericho. That's why the title is Gunpowder and God, because I believe, I'll just throw this out, I've discussed this on other channels. I believe God didn't bring down the walls, except that God provided his chosen people with the secret ingredient for gunpowder, which of course was saltpeter, which allowed them to bring down the wall because they planted explosives in the wall when they accessed it through Rahab's home that was in the wall. In any case, yeah, that's where the story begins, at the walls of Jericho.
And your working title is?
Gunpowder and God. Because that is literally from God, not just because it's saltpeter or nitrogen is the key ingredient in gunpowder. It's also the key ingredient in farming. And that takes us to the Exodus, probably, as you know, where the manna from heaven, little round balls would fall to the desert floor. No one knows what that means. So I theorize about that.
Okay, so here's the interesting thing. Let me just ask you then, what is this gunpowder? I'm sorry, God and gunpowder? What's it got to do with Zionists in 1950?
Well, they misuse. See, that's a gift from God, and God did want them to defeat the Canaanites. They were evil people. They were practicing infanticide. Of course, later the Israelites themselves would fall into depravity and practice all sorts of witchcraft and infanticide, worshiping Baal and Moloch. But God gave, see, people wonder what was in the ark. A lot of people think maybe it was radiation, something nuclear. But no, I think it was their saltpeter, which you can obtain through natural, and which was obtained always through natural sources right up until 1917, the second last year of the First World War. So to answer your question, what happened was, the Sephardic Jews from Europe, who aren't really Jews, they wanted this. This is
Ashkenazim Jews.
The Ashkenazi.
Oh, okay.
And they stole it. So, so that brings us sort of up to the 20th century. But now you asked about this Rabbi Weissmandl. A lot of people don't know about him, but you see, after the Havara agreement went bad between Hitler and the Zionists, of course, Hitler, he would just warehouse all the Jews. He was still rounding them up. He was sort of keeping up his end of the bargain, although it got rough sometimes and some Jews were killed. But the so-called Holocaust, that was yet to come. So here we are in the early years of World War II, 1939, 40. And the Jews were still being rounded up. Hitler was doing his part to round them up for future shipping down to Palestine. And this rabbi came along, Rabbi Weissmandl, and he realized, this Havara agreement has gone south. It's not going to happen. These Jews are wasting away in these camps. And so he cut a deal. He actually cut a deal to get what the Nazis wanted was their money, because they were supposed to get a cut of every Jew they sent down to Palestine. They were supposed to, I think it was, they were going to keep 30% of that Jewish person's wealth. So they would sell the property. We discussed this before. That's what George Soros was doing when he was 14 years old. In
case anybody's missing this, it is absolutely the fact that not just Soros, but a lot of Jews collaborated with the Nazis. It did happen, and some collaborated with the Nazis with the goal of forcing as many Jews as possible to move down to the new state of Israel they were trying to build, whether they really wanted to or not. And that is part of the Israel story that, again, you don't hear a lot about.
And the incentive, if you can call it an incentive, was the Nazis would take your property and sell it and then transfer. That's why it was called the transfer agreement. And they would transfer 70% of your wealth down to a bank in Palestine, which was run by the British, no less. So this was a real triangle, like a love triangle between the Zionists, the Nazis, and the British. But in any case, yeah, the deal went bad. And Rabbi Wiesmandel came along. He said to the Nazis, what do you want? What do you want for all these Jews? And the Nazis, I don't know, they threw out a figure. It's there in my book somewhere. They wanted a few $1 million, and Rabbi Wiesmandel, he thought he could put it all together. To his surprise, when he took he got the deal all hammered out. I mean, at great risk to his life, because being a Jew at this point in the war, remember the Holocaust didn't really start yet. The mass murder of Jews wasn't going on yet, but still Rabbi Wiesmandel was risking his life negotiating back and forth. And to his surprise, the Zionists turned it down. They said, no, and basically they wanted those Jews to continue suffering inside the German concentration camps. And what was going on, by the way, that's worth throwing this in too, Max, in those concentration camps were Jews, not prisoners, but they're called Sonderkommandos. And we're told that the Sonderkommandos were forced upon pain of death to help liquidate the Jews. No, they weren't. They were helping run the camps, and their purpose was to pick out the good Jews, because even though the deal went south, they still wanted the good Jews to be shipped down to Palestine.
And
so
their analysis of good would probably be whitish stock and probably has a college degree, is smart, whatever. Those are the ones they wanted.
Yeah, but not too smart. Not too smart. There's a lot of documentation on this. The Ashkenazi, the Zionists, the Sonderkommandos, they didn't want to be challenged in their authority. So they would take willing dupes. And yes, they had to be strong. They had to have a certain amount of intelligence. They couldn't be lazy. And yeah, that's what they were doing. And then later, it was this myth came out that Jews were being burned alive. That's what the term Holocaust means. And it's impossible to burn a human alive. It takes so much fuel. But the myth for a little while was that the Sonderkommandos, as I said earlier, were forced to accompany their fellow countrymen to the gas chambers or to a flame where they were burned to death. And no, I mean, that just doesn't hold water. How could you force? There's even a story of a Sonderkommando who claims, and he lived in Israel in the 1950s. There's a video of him on YouTube claiming that he had to accompany his own wife and children. He had to walk them to the gas chamber, and that he was given a few minutes to say goodbye to him. What a lie. Any human being would say, well, then kill me too. You know, I wouldn't accompany my wife and kids to their death. And again, the myth is that the Nazis were forcing the Sonderkommandos to do this. Why wouldn't the Nazis just do it themselves? I mean, we're told they hate Jews, so why would they force Jews to help them kill Jews? It doesn't make any sense.
No, but people who had particular people who were not really truly friends of the Jewish people, but acting like they were representing the Jews, were trying to create this whole Israel thing all along. And again, you know, based on what you're saying, you've already said it. Neither one of us would say abolish the Jewish homeland, but this is the dirty secret of the founding. These are dirty secrets about the founding state of the state of Israel. I knew some of these things. I didn't know everything that you were talking about, but I knew some of them. And I think a lot of people are more and more people are starting to say, wait a minute, are we? I mean, we now have an anti-Semitism czar.
Yeah.
So that the government can monitor anybody who's anti-Jewish. And by the way, I just saw a piece in the Federalist, a supposedly conservative publication on the web, saying yes, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And I'm like, really? I mean, because I know a lot of Jews are Zionists. I mean, I don't know that many, but I mean, they're out there, and there's quite a few of them. And the Jews I know who even are pro-Israel, most of them will still say, well, yeah, but not, you know, they're not crazy about it. You know, they're not insta support of everything the current Israeli government is doing. They're not like that. And I've known multiple people in Israel, and they don't. The idea that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism is preposterous, and yet that's how we're starting to act. and I don't see how this is in anybody's interest, because I'm just gonna go back to this. I actually think this taxonomy I've got, as rough as it is one that more people should use, not just on Jews, but everybody, because I think this really, people say the politics of the Middle East are complicated. If you use this chart, it's not. I mean, it's still complicated, but seriously, just let me rant on it. There really are commies all over the Arab world, and they're just like commies everywhere for the most part. Then there are the ethnic nationalists. The Arab nationalists are very real. They are secular. They are mostly non-religious, and they're just like white nationalists or black nationalists or any other kind of nationalist. That's what the Ba'ath Party is. I'm sure you know that, Mischa. I'm not sure we do, but the Ba'ath Party, just as part of the Arab history here, the Ba'ath Party was Saddam Hussein's party and is the party, or was the party, of the Assad family, if I recall correctly, in Syria, which has both a Ba'ath Party and a splinter Arab nationalist party that flies a logo that looks exactly like a swastika. It's not, but it's kind of a Arab lettering swastika thing. Fascism, the real kind, is alive. And once you realize that Arab nationalism and Zionism are very, very similar ideologies, all of a sudden the entire politics of the Middle East, at least to me, just kind of clicks into place and doesn't look that complicated anymore. You got communists, you got nationalists, you got religious observant people, you've got average day citizens set between them. That's what's really happening here. And from my perspective, I don't know why it is in the United States' interest at this point for the United States government, for us to be viewing Israel as our problem. I don't want Israel to go away. I don't want it destroyed, but I don't know, why is it America's problem? And why are we supporting an ethnic nationalist regime in the Middle East?
Well, and not only that, but we're supporting too, because we're supporting the Saudis. And until recently, we were.
They're not ethnic nationalists. They're their own weird thing. But okay.
Well, they're greedy.
Yeah, they're greedy oligarchs, is what they are. Yeah.
Really, but until recently, would you agree that until just a few years ago, we were sort of told that the Saudis hate the Jews. They hate the Israelis. And now we see, they're really in cahoots. And the question is, well, how long have they been in cahoots? And as you may know, the Saudis and the Israelis are the ones wiping Yemen off the map right now. And why? What did the Yemenis ever do to anyone? I mean, they're so dirt poor. And I think that's actually why they're wiping them out, because they just want to take their land and all the resources. So
they must want something. They must want something. Yeah, let me make believe it or not, the Saudis are the only ones on my little chart here that don't quite fit. But no, actually, you know what? No, I want to stick with my chart here, because you know what? They've got all these religious trappings, and they've got this crazy Wahhabist religion, which, by the way, most of the Saudi royal family doesn't take that seriously. The Saudi royal family fall under mobsters, gangsters, and opportunists.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I agree.
That's exactly. Yes. I mean, they've got the religious trappings, but if you think they're serious, guys, really, if you think rich Saudi princes, supposedly observant Muslims, don't cruise down to Israel or parts of other places and hang out with Israelis and get drunk and whore and make business deals, you're crazy. The rich Saudis don't care at all about hating Jews. They care about money and power. Yeah, and that is all the Saudi royal family honestly care. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's thousands of Saudi princes. I'm sure many of them love their country and love their countrymen and blah 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 blah. But no, the Saudi royal family is a bunch of gangsters that made a deal right around World II. That's what the Saudis are.
Not only that, Max, but in the 1970s. They reinforced the deal they had with the West through none other than the Jewish statesman Henry Kissinger, and that gave us, of course, the petrodollar in exchange for which we agree to defend the Saudis, just like we defend the Israelis. So they really are joined at the hip. And yeah, if they hated Jews, why did they sit? I mean, they could have got another negotiator besides Henry Kissinger. They must have respected the man. They must have thought, yeah, he's a deal maker. We can work with him. So yeah,
anybody who's really watched politics in that region knows it is a joke to say that the Saudi royal family wants to wipe Israel off the map. They couldn't care. Israel is a useful whipping boy for them. And this is to a large extent true for some of the, but especially for the Saudis for decades. I have come to see it as this little game where the Saudis go, yeah, Israel, kill them. It's an abomination. It's blah, 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 blah. And then they go down there and get drunk and whore around because they don't really mean it. It's useful. It's stagecraft. It really is. The Saudis don't care that much. They don't. And you think your average citizen, by the way, the average citizen of Saudi Arabia has nothing to do with any of this. And they don't care either. Really. And I've talked to Iranians. They'll tell you, yeah, death to America 18 times a day, whatever. They don't care, actually. A lot of what you hear is just stagecraft by the people, by the elite running things in these countries. Well, this has been really fascinating, Mischa. I think we should probably find a place to close this. But I want the audience to think about this. Get away from accepting the propaganda and the clickbait, the sensation that it's, oh, I got to defend the Jews. No, wait a minute. You're not defending the Jews when you stand up for Zionists. You're not. You're defending a specific subset of Jews. And it would be exactly to me like saying, I'm defending all Arabs everywhere because I'm defending Bashar Assad and his Arab nationalist regime. No, it's insane. We have to think more logically. And really, the more you look at it, I think for years, maybe you'll back me up here, Mischa, maybe not, but I think for years we've been told that the politics of the Middle East is unbelievably complex and nobody can understand it, and that's just a fog. There's very clearly specific groups you can identify and specific ideologies under play. And they like to hide them who they are, but they're not that hard to tease out once you start looking. Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree. Whenever someone says, they kind of tilt their head and they go, oh, it's complicated. No, it's not. It's not. People used to say that, Max, about the Irish problem, of course, with the IRA and Britain, that, oh, it's complicated. No, it's not. The Irish are pissed off with the British, and rightfully so. And maybe they went too far in retaliating. They set off too many bombs and
and the IRA originally was a straight up Marxist organization with KGB funding, just so you know. So I mean, it was complicated in that way, huh?
But the nub of the issue is never complicated.
Right.
One group wants to control or wipe out the other group. And it's so simple, really. And you're absolutely right that when it comes to the Arabs and the Israelis, we're definitely in that realm. They're in cahoots and they want to wipe out the Palestinians and the Yemenis and anyone else who gets in their way. It's very simple.
All right, everybody. Well, do look forward to Mischa's book, which is not out yet, but will be soon. What's it called again?
It'll be called Gunpowder and God.
Gunpowder and God, and I'm already looking forward to it. You'll find his work on Michael Jones's Culture Wars magazine, so that's where you can find him. And we did publish an article of his on Saltpeter, and he's always great to have on as a guest. Good to have you on again. Very knowledgeable, very informative. Thank you very much, and God bless, Mischa.
And God bless you too, Max. Thanks for having me.
And everybody, give us a like, give us a subscribe, help us out on our fundraiser, and God bless everybody.